About 800 years BC, continental traders arrived with the know-how to smelt iron ore, and we have evidence that small-scale smelting may have been done in Stauerpain. On the top shelf against the roundhouse scene is some iron slag, still magnetic, found not far from Hod Hill. The slag was cut in half for a specialist from Bournemouth University to provide a macroscopic description. Its shape and size indicate a small furnace, where a team typically pumped bellows for hours to achieve 1200 degrees centigrade or more to melt the iron, a process which improved over later centuries. Our slag sample, however, is likely from the Iron Age, as it was never fully molten, a common characteristic of pre-Roman Iron Age slag. Bronze was still used for jewellery and mirrors, and this shelf also holds a triangular bronze toggle about an inch across, which was used to fasten a dress. As in the Bronze Age, Iron Age tribal groups constructed some villages on high ground, and Dorset was part of a wider area occupied by a tribe called the Durotriges, their settlements ruled by a council or chieftain and sited in a chain of fortified hilltops. One such community settled on Hod Hill, the bare hillside in the background of our roundhouse scene. Its flat, squarish top offered an all-round view of the countryside and 22 hectares of habitable land, almost twice that of the settlement on Hambledon Hill. About 500 BC, this tribe constructed defensive ditches and banks around their hilltop village, maintaining and even strengthening them throughout the Iron Age, suggesting that the threat of tribal warfare continued during this period, and their call to arms was the Celtic war horn, the carnix. Geophysical surveys of Hod paint a picture of everyday life taking place in laid-out streets of roundhouses, with small, rectangular buildings sited along main routes, possibly traders' booths or shops. Cattle pulled the plough across fields on the lower slopes and hauled carts up and down the steep hillsides, climbing 103 metres or 340 feet to the highest point. Perhaps hundreds of people lived on Hod, the smoke from their hearths seen from other hilltop settlements nearby. Recent DNA tests on Durotrigian human remains reveal that the tribe was matrilocal. This means that on marriage, a tribeswoman remained in her village while her husband left his village to move into hers. The Durotriges had a long-established trading routes with tribes from Armorica, now Brittany, especially the Veneti tribe, who sailed between ports at Poole and Hengistbury to somewhere near Saint-Malo and along the coast to Normandy. So a wealthy Durotrigian chieftain might have drunk Tuscan wine and eaten Italian figs from the continent, traded for Durotrigian crafts, corn, and animal skins. For about 400 years, the hill-dwelling Durotriges cleared the lowlands to expand their farming, and by the Middle Iron Age they were growing store-cupboard foods with pulses such as beans and cereals like wheat and barley. The Durotriges struck their own coins in the last century BC, and we have one of their silver statters. At 19 millimeters across, the Durotrigian statter was the largest silver coin produced in Britain, and was later debased to bronze. The design is pure abstract, including a disjointed horse, possibly symbolizing the goddess Epona. No single Durotrigian ruler appears on Durotrigian coins, so their tribal groups probably lived in a successful confederation without needing an overlord. If men had to live in their wives' villages after marriage, perhaps this prevented family groups of belligerent males forming to invade other settlements. With well-fed communities, the population expanded, and by the middle of the last century BC, many people had left Hod to live and farm in the lowlands. But in 56 BC, the Romans and the Belgae tribe massacred the Veneti tribe and burnt their Brittany ports to the ground. cutting off the Durotrige's cross-channel trade at a stroke. After the Roman-led destruction of the Durotrige's trading partners in Brittany, the tribe resisted Roman overtures for decades. This local resistance ended in 43 or 44 AD, when soldiers and cavalry from General Vespasian's Second Legio Augusta rode up Hod Hill to establish a dunum, that's Latin for fortress, in the northwest corner of the Iron Age hill fort. In the British Museum is evidence for the legion's presence there, including a 55-centimetre Roman sword found on the hilltop. The 2-inch wide blade was probably around 50 centimetres long, but now lacks about 3 inches off the end, possibly broken deliberately. Our legionnaire carried a gladius, a little shorter than this broken sword, and meant for thrusting and stabbing, never for slashing, which was disapproved of in Roman military training. The auxiliary soldier carried a spatha, which was longer than the gladius, and the British Museum suggests that the broken Hod sword was better suited to a cavalry trooper, who could have come from the auxiliary unit. Both fighters hold curved shields, swords, daggers and spears, with the legionnaire fully equipped for battle. He wears segmented metal armour over a studded leather apron and has a close-fitting helmet with brow and neck protection and lifting cheek guards, a heavily armour-plated fighting machine. The auxiliary, by contrast, wears a knee-length tunic of fine chain mail with fixed cheek guards. The British Museum has a small clump of this chainmail found on Hod, and such lightweight protection suited the auxiliary's role of light infantry and cavalry, scouting and carrying out routine patrols. A bloody battle between the Romans and Durotrigian tribesmen on Hod has been dismissed by archaeologists, who believe that the fort was abandoned 100 years earlier in favour of lowland settlements, so perhaps only a shepherd and his flock were there to witness the sudden arrival of the legion on the hilltop. With 600 soldiers and 250 mounted cavalry and horses to accommodate, the legion got on with building their wooden fort straight away. The Romans retained the ancient banks and ditches in the northwest corner of the hill fort and added their own to the west and south. The wooden garrison buildings were set out in predictably straight lines, rather resembling Blandford camp in the 2 World Wars. They laid foundation beams carrying timber huts, whose walls were finished with wattle and daub. And the fort was protected by wooden gates to south and east, with double and single watchtowers. The narrow northwestern gate to Hod was named Watergate, presumably because it was the easiest route to the river, 340 feet below. With nearly 1,000 troops and horses in the fortress, there were garrison cisterns to hold fresh water, and we know that one water tank was sited in the northeast corner of the garrison. It had been dug in the chalk and lined with wood, backed with puddled clay. Unless the Romans had a water-lifting device we don't know about, someone had to fill those cisterns and keep them topped up. The legion only stayed in Dunum for around 6 years, and a fire decimated the barracks sometime before they left around 51 AD, when military orders moved them west. You are at the junction where 2 civilizations met and fused to create a new culture, Romano-British. The back of this display holds photos of the Durden Private Museum and Aladdin's Cave of pre- and post-invasion artefacts found by Henry Durden. He was a Victorian Blandford grocer who was also an amateur archaeologist, and most of his collection is now in the British Museum. Our display holds objects found by more modern seekers. At the bottom, for instance, are round and ovoid slingshots, like those used as weapons by Roman soldiers, some of whom apparently wrote rude Latin messages to their enemies on the sling stones. Sadly, our slingshots only carry information from the museum database. There are Romano-British spindle walls of lead and stone used for teasing fibre into thread for weaving. The first shelf up holds Romano-British pottery from 200 to 300 years after the invasion. One fragment of orange Samian ware comes from the base of a dish or plate, with the potter's name Max Mini stamped on the underside. He was Maximus of Lazoux, and his pottery was in eastern France. One can imagine that from their arrival on Hod, with a fortress to build and equipment to repair or replace, the Legio Augusta needed to court the services of nearby merchants and artisans, and we can trace possible trading between the Romans and local craftsmen. The sword is Roman, but has Celtic-style bronze decoration to the hilt. This small bronze buckle from Hod dates from the invasion. It might have been made locally for a legionnaire's sandal or for the belt of a Celtic herdsman. We have twisted bronze bracelets and brooches of Roman design. And with new customers to please, Durotrigian craftsmen learnt about Roman styles and techniques and began to incorporate them into their work. We have two examples of pre- and post-invasion brooches made about 100 years apart. An Iron Age craftsman made our safety pin brooch in the last century BC. It's 1.5 inches long and uses a single bronze wire about 1 millimetre thick. The maker left a straight section for the pin, coiled the wire into a spring, and then hammered flat the remaining wire to form a narrow ribbon for the front of the brooch. Perhaps 100 years later, after the invasion, a Romano-British craftsman likely made our rust-coloured Langton Down type bow brooch, using a Roman method to fasten it. The 3.5-inch reeded bronze body has a cylinder attached at right angles to its head, enclosing a separate spring, the first type of brooch in Britain known to use this method. The broken stub of the pin emerges from the cylinder, still joined to coils of spring inside. Merchants, craftsmen, and food producers were paid by satisfied customers in Roman coinage. Roman currency was the MasterCard of the time, as it was accepted across Britain and overseas, in every corner of the burgeoning empire.